Tarako just wanted to get back to school early, but little did she know she would come across a body hanging from a utility pole. As Tarako was at a loss for what to do, the body surprisingly began to drip snot, which miraculously flew onto Tarako's head. The next second, the body opened its eyes. The reason it was hanging there was, of course, because of the antlers on its head. Suddenly, Shikanoko stared at Tarako with a death glare, frightening Tarako immensely. But upon further thought, if she took a detour to school at this time, she would definitely be late, which was absolutely unacceptable for an honor student. So, she decided to act as if she hadn't seen anything and prepared to leave. At that moment, a terrifying voice came from behind. "Are you going to just stand by and watch someone die?" Frightened, Tarako hurriedly explained that she hadn't ignored a person in need. She thought the other was just playing around on the utility pole. Just as Tarako was about to leave, Shikanoko quickly said, "Every morning you pass this road, you will remember my face and live in regret for the rest of your life." At this, Tarako, finally deciding out of fear to save her, managed to rescue Shikanoko after some effort. Curious, Tarako asked why she was in such a place. Shikanoko didn't know either, and even called Tarako "bad girl, big sister." Hearing the word bad, Tarako instantly got upset and loudly questioned her. "Who are you calling a delinquent?" Tarako claimed she was gentle and virtuous and could not possibly be a delinquent. Shikanoko stated it was her antlers that detected it, shocking Tarako. Tarako suddenly realized that staying any longer with this person would be very dangerous, as she had indeed been a real troublemaker in the past. The exposed Tarako quickly looked for a chance to leave. After returning to school, Tarako felt uneasy, sensing that something big was about to happen. Sure enough, in the next second, Shikanoko walked in as a transfer student but got stuck because of her long antlers. She then forcibly broke through the wall to enter, acting as if nothing had happened, and cheerfully introduced herself to everyone, who warmly applauded her. Tarako suddenly noticed an empty seat next to her. Was she going to sit next to her? This could spell doom for her image as a well-behaved, top-performing student. Her happy high school life was in jeopardy. So Tarako decided to take the initiative and awkwardly greeted Shikanoko, telling her to ask her anything if confused. Shikanoko politely thanked her. Tarako thought this would lead to a peaceful high school life, but that was wishful thinking. Shikanoko called her "bad girl, big sister," making Tarako feel like the sky was falling. The classmates were incredulous. So, Tarako is a delinquent? Tarako, sweating profusely, begged Shikanoko to stop talking nonsense. Shikanoko insisted she wasn't lying, and even knew Tarako was a virgin because her antlers reacted. This statement drew intense attention from classmates and teachers. At this point, Tarako really wished Shikanoko would stop talking, and she shyly bowed her head in embarrassment over the topic. During the break, Tarako wanted to have a serious talk with Shikanoko, but as soon as she pushed open the classroom door, she found a pile of little deer cookies on her desk. It turned out that this was Shikanoko's way of thanking Tarako for saving her life. However, seeing the drool from Shikanoko, Tarako couldn't help but complain, as it seemed like they were made for Shikanoko herself. Seeing that Tarako was not pleased with the gift, Shikanoko directly pulled off one of her antlers and gave it to Tarako. Tarako looked disgusted, and the next second, Shikanoko explained that the antlers were edible. Tarako showed no interest. Thinking it was because the antler was drooled on, Shikanoko pulled off the one she hadn't chewed and offered it to her. Seeing that Tarako still didn't want it, Shikanoko reluctantly put the antler back on. But then, Shikanoko thought Tarako wanted to eat deer meat. However, in order to repay her kindness, Shikanoko eventually agreed and knelt in front of Tarako, offering herself for Tarako to eat. Tarako was speechless, feeling as if she were bullying Shikanoko. Noticing the strange looks from other students, Tarako quickly dragged Shikanoko to the restroom, warning her not to call her "bad girl, big sister" again, and not to mention that she used to be a delinquent, or else she would mock Shikanoko's antlers. The next second, Shikanoko became sad, realizing that they couldn't avoid such idle gossip. She forced a smile and apologized. Hearing this, Tarako also felt she had been too harsh. Just as Tarako was about to apologize to Shikanoko, Shikanoko suddenly removed her skull. After school, after being tormented all day, Tarako was just about to go home when she heard a loud noise from the storeroom. Rushing over, she found Shikanoko bloodied on the ground. Tarako was at a loss. The next second, Shikanoko got up, having only fallen from a ladder. Tarako's face stiffened. After helping Shikanoko bandage her wounds, Tarako also helped clean up. It turned out Shikanoko had founded a club called Deer Club and planned to use this place as the club's base, which the teacher had also agreed to. To Tarako's surprise, the teacher appointed her as the president of the Deer Club, all thanks to Shikanoko's meddling. Unable to refuse the teacher, Tarako unwittingly became the president of this strange club. At that moment, Shikanoko handed a brush to Tarako, because the purpose of the Deer Club was to take care of deer. As Tarako was brushing Shikanoko, a strange woman in the distance was watching the two of them. The latest episode of Shikanoko is extremely abstract. Tarako, in an attempt to hide her past as a delinquent, reluctantly becomes the president of the Deer Club. Just when Tarako thinks she can keep her secret safe by keeping Shikanoko happy, she catches the attention of a girl with a crazed look in her eyes. The next day, Tarako arrives at the Deer Club, only to find it burned down. Frustrated at seeing her carefully arranged club destroyed, Tarako loses her temper. At that moment, Shikanoko, hiding in a corner, calls out to Tarako, leading her to believe that Shikanoko is responsible for everything. However, Shikanoko claims that the room was already like this when she arrived and that she had been stalked since early morning, fell into a 5-meter deep pit on her way to school, and was even hit in the head by a spear falling from the sky. Tarako is incredulous. Who survives a spear through the head? So she doesn't believe Shikanoko's words. As Tarako is about to leave, an arrow suddenly flies past her, aiming at Shikanoko behind her. Shikanoko dramatically declares that the battle has begun, convincing Tarako of her story. It seems Shikanoko really is being targeted. Thus, Tarako decisively decides to leave Shikanoko behind and escape this troublesome place. Of course, Shikanoko won't let her go that easily. Just then, Tarako accidentally steps on a trap and is hit on the head by a frying pan, awakening her delinquent spirit to find and punish the culprit. At that moment, a bunch of deer cookies rolls to the door. Although Tarako immediately recognizes it as a trap, she doesn't warn Shikanoko in time, who rushes towards them. Despite being pulled back and explained by Tarako that it's a trap, Shikanoko declares she would brave any danger for the deer cookies, her favorite snack. Unable to hold her back this time, Shikanoko is soon caught by a net trap. A girl then emerges, revealing herself to be the mastermind behind everything. When Shikanoko demands a fair fight, Tarako calls out the girl's name, and the girl immediately changes her demeanor, rushing to embrace Tarako. It turns out the girl is Tarako's sister, Anko, who felt that Shikanoko had stolen her sister away. Anko had been secretly following Tarako and became upset upon seeing her sister seemingly intimate with a deer, leading to her drastic actions. Hearing this, Tarako feels helpless and lets Shikanoko explain to her sister. Shikanoko boldly claims that Tarako is her woman and that she will protect her, leaving Tarako speechless and Anko even more infuriated. Tarako is at her wit's end, realizing this misunderstanding is far from being cleared up. So Anko accepted Shikanoko's challenge and let her down, planning a duel over their sister. If Shikanoko were to lose, she would become a deer and live forever in Nara Park. Conversely, if Anko lost, she would concede her sister to Shikanoko along with a lifetime supply of deer cookies. Upon hearing this, Shikanoko decisively agreed. Tarako was speechless. If Shikanoko really turned into a deer in Nara Park, what would happen to their deer club? But Shikanoko firmly urged her to have faith. The duel was simple. They would compete by answering trivia about Tarako's secrets. Correct answers earned points, with the highest scorer winning. Given the absurdity of the contest, Tarako couldn't even bother to comment. The competition started quickly, but before the teacher could finish the question, Anko pressed the buzzer. What is the last thing Tarako does before going to sleep each night? The answer: she talks to the stuffed animals in her room and wishes them good night. Tarako furiously clarified it was a rumor, but the teacher presented a photo of her cuddling a stuffed toy saying good night. Shikanoko buzzed in for the next question. Is Tarako currently wearing underwear? The answer was that she wore a cupped camisole, which technically meant she wasn't wearing any. The answer was correct, and then a video was shown as evidence. Tarako screamed in protest. Thus, they exchanged points, continually exposing Tarako's embarrassing secrets. The day quickly passed. and by dusk, the scores were still tied, leading to a world where only Tarako got hurt, and Anko broke down. She couldn't believe anyone knew her sister better than she did, and accused Shikanoko of cheating, suspecting Shikanoko had used a nationwide deer information network to gather data on her sister. Anko then pressed a switch, activating a trap she had set up earlier, and numerous spears were shot at Shikanoko, who dodged them all. This deer was no ordinary creature. Tarako decided to leave amid the chaos, but at that moment, Anko slipped and accidentally threw a spear at Tarako. Shikanoko took the hit to protect her and then fell down, overcome by drowsiness. Seeing this, Tarako was terrified and urged Shikanoko to open her eyes. No matter how she called, Shikanoko could no longer hear her. Accompanied by Tarako's desperate screams, 2 deer angels appeared and took Shikanoko's soul away. In an unexpected twist, God kicked Shikanoko's soul back the next second because the spear had not pierced her heart. This was thanks to the deer cookies Shikanoko had secretly picked up and kept over her heart when Anko released her. Tarako was speechless. She had seen coins block bullets, but never cookies block spears. The recent events changed Anko's perspective about Shikanoko, prompting her to concede and withdraw from the contest. Shikanoko graciously forgave Anko. Although the two reconciled, Tarako, as the protagonist, felt completely out of the loop from start to finish and secretly decided to wear a bra the next day. Consequently, Shikanoko immediately noticed the color of her underwear the following day. How abstract is the latest episode of Shikanoko? That day, when Tarako arrived at the Deer Society, she found a deer sneaking some of their deer cookies. Initially, Tarako thought the deer was brought by Shikanoko, but after searching around, she couldn't find any trace of Shikanoko. Seeing this, Tarako began to suspect and eventually concluded it was Shikanoko. Annoyed by this thought, Tarako demanded Shikanoko reveal her true form. However, the deer showed no reaction, leading Tarako to think that Shikanoko was deliberately teasing her. Thus, Tarako decided to expose her disguise directly, claiming she would skin the deer. The next second, she was kicked away by the deer. However, Tarako was not deterred. She bought 2 cups of bubble tea, intending to lure Shikanoko into revealing herself with food. But the deer showed no interest in the milk tea and started eating the grass in the flower pot instead. Seeing this, Tarako was upset as she had carefully nurtured those plants and couldn't just let them be eaten. Tarako's actions angered the deer again, which made a strange noise. When stags are intimidating or intending to attack, they make a clucking sound, so it was definitely not safe to approach them at this moment. Seeing this, Tarako pulled out her trump card, placing several mineral water bottles in front of the deer. Shikanoko had previously mentioned being startled by roadside mineral water bottles. Yet, facing Tarako's water bottle shadow kill array, the deer showed no fear, leaving Tarako bewildered. When had it overcome this weakness? So, Tarako decided to pull out all the stops to pique Shikanoko's interest fundamentally. She took out a booklet detailing all her embarrassing history, suggesting that if Shikanoko reverted to her true form, she would let her look at the booklet. This trick worked somewhat as the deer showed a bit of interest, but did not revert to its original form. Seeing this, Tarako decided to go even further to force Shikanoko to appear. She then started singing her original song and performed an awkward dance. However, the more embarrassing part was that after Tarako finished singing, she found Shikanoko standing right behind her. Stunned, Tarako wondered why there were 2 Shikanokos. It turned out the deer was not Shikanoko in disguise, but a real deer that had escaped from Shikanoko's workplace. While Tarako was shocked, Shikanoko picked up the booklet from the ground and asked Tarako to sing again. Hearing this, Tarako felt like dying, bewildered by what she had just done. After sending the deer away and some time had passed, Tarako and Shikanoko advanced to the 3rd grade. As the student council president, Tarako delivered a speech at the freshmen's entrance ceremony. However, when they returned to the Deer Society after the ceremony, they found a girl lying at the entrance, drooling all over the ground. Seeing the girl on the ground, Tarako initially thought she was dead. Just as she was about to call an ambulance, the girl suddenly woke up. It turned out her name was Mimi, a new first-year student. She had come looking for her idol but had ended up falling asleep on the ground while waiting. Hearing this, Tarako thought Meme was referring to her as the idol, especially since she had just given a speech at the ceremony. She assumed Meme must have been captivated by her impressive appearance. However, Mime expressed her desire to become like Shikanoko, which Tarako found unbelievable. Moreover, Mime didn't even recognize Tarako, which was quite embarrassing. Before the entrance ceremony, Mime had fainted from hunger on the street. Just when she thought her life was over, Shikanoko had saved her life with a deer cookie. But that wasn't the most important part. The moment she asked Shikanoko for her name, Shikanoko had said, "It's a trivial matter, not worth mentioning." This statement deeply touched Mime's heart, and she came to seek Shikanoko as a mentor. Hearing this, Shikanoko was delighted and soon agreed to Mime's request. Mime promised to do her best to fulfill the role of a deer, and Shikanoko invited her to join the Deer Society, introducing the rules and Tarako's position as president. Tarako couldn't be bothered to comment and simply agreed to let her join. Meanwhile, Tarako's overly attached younger sister Anko also planned to join the Deer Society so she could be with her sister 24/7. However, when she arrived at the society, she saw the scene and felt like she had yet another competitor. Thus, Anko joined the Deer Society, which now grew into a 4-member club. Anko's self-assigned role was to take care of her sister, while Tarako, as the president, was effectively the deer caretaker. However, Tarako felt that being idle all the time was not sustainable, and the society would eventually be disbanded if they continued this way. Thus, she called a meeting to set a goal for everyone to achieve this year. As a senior member, Rokujizo was the first to propose a goal: to bathe in a bathtub filled with deer cookies, which Tarako immediately dismissed. Shikanoko had no other goals besides this, so Tarako reluctantly turned to Mime. Besides wanting to become a deer, Mime also wanted to grow a rice paddy in the society so she could be a self-sufficient, well-fed deer. Tarako was truly at a loss. Thus, she placed her hopes on her sister Anko, who had joined the Deer Society solely for Tarako. Anko's goal was to stand by her sister and support her silently. But Tarako had barely been touched for 2.5 seconds when Anko suddenly changed her demeanor. She hoped to make her sister so dependent on her that she couldn't live without her, which was quite frightening. Shikanoko was also curious about what Tarako's goal was. Tarako proudly announced her goal: to make the activity room cuter. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. They even mocked her for thinking they were abnormal. So, by that logic, they argued, our goals are just as reasonable, since at least they all relate to deer. Shikanoko told Tarako that the purpose of the Deer Society was to take care of deer, and if they didn't take good care of her, she would run away from home, which would naturally lead to the disbanding of the society and Tarako being held accountable. Therefore, before discussing the direction of activities, it was even more important to prioritize the care of the deer. Though Tarako was somewhat reluctant, she couldn't deny that Shikanoko had a point, so she grudgingly groomed Shikanoko as requested. However, seeing this scene, the other two became jealous. Mime then joined in as an apprentice deer, and at that moment, Anko claimed she understood Tarako better and was more suited to be the deer of the Deer Society. The next second, Tarako felt Anko's oppressive presence. Meanwhile, as the mere mortals argued, members of other clubs were quietly watching them from the shadows. On that day, the Deer Club was targeted by 3 girls who wanted to abolish it from the school. These 3 were Tarako's subordinates in the student council. The vice president, Neko, was the mastermind behind the plan, aiming to exploit Tarako's weakness to remove her from the presidency and rightfully ascend from vice president to president. Kinu, the student council secretary, was a typical anxiety sufferer. She always imagined the worst possible consequences for even minor mistakes, often contemplating suicide over them. The last member, Chiharu, the student council treasurer, was a reserved and taciturn girl who would typically respond to any question about Toriko in 3 words or less. Chiharu was chosen to spearhead the plan and was the first sent to the Deer Club. Seeing her, Tarako felt a bit guilty, fearing that Shikanoko might reveal her past as a delinquent, which would ruin her image as a model student. Therefore, Toriko warned Shikanoko not to do anything unnecessary and then welcomed Chiharu with a smile. However, Toriko had forgotten about the other 2 oddballs in the club. After throwing them out of the club, she forced a smile and began introducing the Deer Club to Chiharu. At that moment, Shikanoko, holding precious video material, began to explain their daily activities at the club. The videos detailed Tarako's various embarrassing moments. Tarako quickly served Chiharu a cup of tea to change the subject. Just as Tarako was pondering what to say next, Shikanoko dumped a pile of Deer Fairy cookies on Chiharu, using deer snacks as hospitality. As Tarako was about to apologize, the usually aloof Chiharu unexpectedly blushed with joy. Seeing this, Tarako was dumbfounded, not expecting anyone to actually like snacks intended for deer. Seeing Chiharu's fondness for the Deer Fairy cookies, Shikanoko decided to give her another big gift. Tarako thought no one would like a gift of grass, but seeing Chiharu's excited expression, she felt quite defeated. As a senior, she also wanted to be admired by her junior, but no matter what she offered, Chiharu maintained her aloof demeanor. An hour later, Tarako ended in a resounding defeat. Afterward, Chiharu coldly thanked everyone and returned home. It turned out that Chiharu was a super fan of Shikanoko. She had come to the Deer Club primarily to meet Shikanoko, but with Tarako present, she restrained her enthusiasm. The next day, Kinu and Tarako went to the sports equipment room to check the inventory. Jokingly, Tarako mentioned that people often got mysteriously locked in there, hoping that wouldn't happen to them. The next second, the door closed, and they indeed found themselves locked inside, nearly scaring Kinu to death. She immediately sat down and began writing her will. Tarako was astounded. Being locked in wasn't deadly, but Kinu's thought process was beyond ordinary understanding. She imagined dying from hunger after eating sponges, and eventually becoming a legendary ghost of the campus. Tarako was left speechless. Just as she was about to comfort Kinu, Tarako heard someone passing by outside the window. She hurriedly climbed up to the window, only to find Shikanoko passing by. Unfortunately, due to the glass, Shikanoko couldn't hear her cries for help and began singing her original song instead. Despite Tarako shouting herself hoarse, Shikanoko couldn't hear her. Watching Shikanoko walk away, Tarako had no choice but to sit down and wait for someone to rescue them. When she turned around, she found Kinu had hidden inside a vaulting box. Thus, Tarako had to comfort her, telling her not to be afraid. However, the more Tarako tried to reassure her, the more frightened Kinu became, even considering staying inside the vaulting box for life. So Tarako had no choice but to pull her out. Just then, the door to the storeroom opened, and Shikanoko appeared. Tarako was overjoyed, thinking Shikanoko had come to rescue them. But unexpectedly, Shikanoko had only come to pick the mushrooms she had secretly planted in the vaulting box. While Shikanoko was delighted to finally harvest the mushrooms she had been longing for, she discovered Kinu hiding in the box. Eventually, both of them safely escaped the storeroom, and the mushrooms were turned into a mushroom risotto. However, Tarako was speechless about how the Deer Club had gained 2 more oddballs. That day, when Tarako arrived at school, she found someone had written her a love letter. But the sudden appearance of Shikanoko behind her gave Tarako a big scare. It was unusual for Shikanoko, who usually timed her arrival at school perfectly, to come so early today. Shikanoko explained that she had simply turned over in her sleep and found herself at school upon waking. Tarako was speechless, not having noticed Shikanoko's presence at all. However, Shikanoko mentioned that she was also fighting for her life daily, battling against the Hunter Association's helicopters and machine guns, dodging attacks in the forest. Naturally, Tarako didn't believe her, and Shikanoko didn't argue but instead asked if Tarako would consider dating the person who wrote the love letter. Hearing this, Tarako blushed. Taking Shikanoko's advice seriously, she opened the love letter, only to find it wasn't a love letter at all, but a challenge letter for a fight. Angered, Tarako accepted the challenge. She and Shikanoko went to the designated place for the fight, which turned out to be from Tarako's old rival, who had disguised the letter as a love letter to mock her. After revealing this, the rival teased Tarako about bringing such an ugly pet to a fight. The rival didn't care, saying it didn't matter how many people came. As long as she defeated Tarako there, she could claim the throne as the top delinquent girl of Hino. Just as Tarako was about to accept the challenge, she found Shikanoko more eager than herself. Shikanoko told Tarako that she was a hybrid of deer and human, supposedly the strongest in the primate class. Tarako was speechless. Meanwhile, the opponent was tired of their banter and pulled out their weapons, ready for a showdown with Tarako. Unfortunately, even she couldn't overcome the challenge of multiple opponents. As the other attackers got back on their feet, it seemed like Tarako was losing the upper hand. At that moment, Shikanoko threw her antlers to Tarako, suggesting she use them as a weapon. Skeptical of their usefulness, Tarako threw the antlers away, only for them to explode and blow up the gymnasium. Luckily, this was all part of a comedic, unserious anime. The next day, curious about what creature Shikanoko really was, Tarako secretly followed her. After 2.5 hours of observation, Shikanoko just sat in the park, seemingly lost in thought. Tarako felt pity for her, assuming she was a homeless child. When Shikanoko mentioned she was getting hungry, Tarako felt even sorrier for her, thinking she didn't even have money to buy food. However, just as Tarako was contemplating this, Shikanoko took off the antlers on her head, revealing they were stuffed with bananas. After eating the bananas, Shikanoko put the antlers back on and left the park. Tarako thought she was heading home, but was surprised to see Shikanoko enter the Hino Zoo and go straight to the deer viewing area, lying down next to 2 deer. As Tarako was about to criticize Shikanoko's puzzling behavior, 2 tourists approached, and Shikanoko skillfully greeted them. Just then, the zoo announced there would be a grand deer parade. Shikanoko then rode on a deer into the streets of the park. As Tarako wondered what this spectacle was about, Shikanoko stood up among the deer, glowing with a golden light and becoming incredibly popular. At that moment, Shikanoko noticed Tarako, who quickly claimed she was just passing by. As the zoo closed for the day, Shikanoko, who had finished her part-time job, decided to treat herself to a milk tea. Tarako had always thought Shikanoko was penniless, only to find out her head was stuffed with stacks of cash. In the end, Tarako joined Shikanoko for bubble tea, and the joy of eating with classmates made her forget about following Shikanoko further. After saying goodbye to Shikanoko, Tarako headed home. The next day, Neko, who was plotting to destroy the Deer Club, quietly visited the club, hoping to dig up some dirt on Tarako to dethrone her and take her place as the student council president. However, as soon as she peeked inside, Shikanoko spotted her, but mistook her intent, thinking she wanted to join the Deer Club. Inviting Neko inside, Shikanoko was overjoyed, mistakenly welcoming her as a new member. Neko, speechless and unable to reveal her true intentions, decided to participate in the club activities, hoping to still find something against Tarako. Shikanoko happily initiated several deer-related activities, which completely baffled Neko, and Shikanoko didn't care in the slightest, planning to train Neko next. This time, the training was about controlling the length of the antlers, because she could see that Neko had the potential to become a deer. After saying this, she explained to Neko the method to control the length of the antlers. The training method was also very simple. Just imagine the antlers gradually growing longer in your mind. This was too abstract. Under the repeated praises from Shikanoko and Meme, Neko also felt she had great potential to become a deer. After the club activities ended, Shikanoko took off her antlers and gave them to Neko, declaring her capable of standing on her own as a deer. It was only later that Neko realized she had completely failed to find any weaknesses in Tarako. One day, Shikanoko saw that Tarako looked sleepy, so she decided to make her a cup of coffee. Unexpectedly, she flipped open her mouth lid, followed by intense shaking, and then spit out the coffee. Tarako instantly lost interest. Seeing that Tarako didn't like his coffee, Shikanoko decided to try again by performing a magic trick for Tarako, bending a spoon with his mind, which then unexpectedly started to glow. However, it turned out that what bent were not the spoons, but his antlers. Time quickly moved on to summer, which was the happiest season for Anko, who was obsessed with his sister, because Tarako finally wore the summer outfit he had been longing for, could admire his sister's sexy armpits, and even catch a glimpse of her bra straps showing through the thin summer uniform. Anko's expression turned increasingly perverse. However, after summer arrived, everyone noticed that Shikanoko was acting a bit strange. Although Shikanoko herself didn't realize it, she indeed had many spots appearing on her body. Tarako then thought she might have contracted some strange disease from eating too much roadside trash. Upon hearing this, Shikanoko was furious. As a noble deer, how could she possibly eat garbage from the roadside? If she were to pick something up, it would only be deer cookies that had fallen to the ground. Meme, who was very familiar with rice, also believed that Shikanoko was indeed sick with a disease common to rice called rice blast disease. This is a frequent disease in rice that initially manifests as spots on the affected rice. If the symptoms worsen, it could lead to the complete withering of the entire rice field. Tarako was speechless. This wasn't even a disease that animals could get. Surprisingly, Shikanoko actually believed it. So, to avoid causing trouble for farmers nationwide, Shikanoko decided to leave the area, entrusting the future of the Deer Society to Tarako. Just then, a deer walked in because it was too hot outside and it had come to the Deer Society to cool off. Seeing the spots on the deer, Tarako was surprised to find that the spots on Shikanoko were exactly the same as those on the deer. Anko quickly realized that Shikanoko wasn't suffering from rice blast disease at all. She was simply shedding her fur. Upon hearing this, Shikanoko suddenly remembered that she had indeed been losing a lot of fur since yesterday. She showed the fur she had shed to Tarako. She was greatly surprised. It was as if it was molting. Mime put on that layer of fur, and just like that, Deer Society now had 2 deer. Time soon arrived at autumn, and Shikanoko also experienced her second fur shedding. She decided to give this discarded fur to Anko, but Anko wouldn't accept such a strange behavior. Later, when Neko was holding a meeting in the student council to abolish the Deer Society, she unexpectedly found that Shikanoko had sneaked in. Seeing the main character of the meeting here, Neko was somewhat dumbfounded. Shikanoko spoke on her own accord. "I have made a century's discovery." Then she took out this strange object, which left Neko even more dumbfounded. But while she was puzzled, this strange sphere suddenly moved. Seeing this, Neko was completely frightened. She hadn't expected this object to actually be a living creature. Shikanoko explained that she had discovered it while digging holes in the playground. Neko was speechless, leaving aside why Shikanoko would dig holes in the playground. How could such a strange creature exist in this world? However, the other 2 were not scared at all. Chiharu even named it. Just then, the little creature suddenly lost its energy. Seeing this, Shikanoko guessed it must be hungry, so she decided to feed it. She then opened her brain, took out some senbei, rice crackers, and tried to feed it, but the next second, it dodged the senbei. She was shocked. She then tried feeding it milk tea and grass, but it didn't like either. She couldn't understand. Seeing it show a threatening posture, Shikanoko was extremely sad. She hadn't expected that it wouldn't like any of her favorite foods. Finally, after various attempts, everyone discovered that the little guy's favorite food was actually chalk. Seeing that everyone was not afraid of this strange thing, Neko began to doubt life itself. Just then, the little creature reached out its hand towards her. Out of curiosity, Neko also extended her hand, and the next second, she was charmed. Then, as Tarako pushed open the door and saw the strange creature, she was puzzled. But Neko wouldn't allow her to refer to it as such a strange thing, claiming that she would take responsibility for taking care of this child. On that day, Tarako and Shikanoko launched a live stream online to raise funds for their deer club. Their teacher had promised Tarako that if they reached a certain number of viewers, she would increase the club's funding. Unexpectedly, the viewer count quickly soared into the thousands. To thank everyone for their support, Tarako decided to introduce the club's deer to the audience. Surprisingly, the viewers immediately began commenting, expressing that it was their first time seeing a deer. Tarako found this strange since Shikanoko hadn't even appeared yet. Where did they see the deer? Then Shikanoko put antlers on Tarako, and she had no choice but to reintroduce herself. But when she turned around, she discovered Shikanoko had disappeared again. Turning back, she found Shikanoko rubbing his antlers against the wall because they felt itchy. Tarako was speechless. There was a tree specifically for scratching nearby, so why scratch against the wall? Shikanoko explained that the rough concrete surface felt more satisfying. Tarako was exasperated. Although she wanted to scold Shikanoko since they were still live, she just smiled and asked him to sit in front of the camera. However, once Shikanoko sat down, Tarako noticed that his antlers seemed much longer, almost as if he had styled them into twin ponytails. At first, Tarako thought she was mistaken, but as she was about to introduce Shikanoko to the viewers, she turned around and saw that his antlers had become much thicker. Tarako then realized this was no illusion. She quickly asked Shikanoko what was going on with his antlers. The situation became more and more exaggerated. The viewers' comments revealed the answer. Deer shed their antlers annually, and Shikanoko was currently in the shedding period. Shikanoko's antlers began to grow wildly. Seeing this, Tarako was stunned. Just as she was wondering how to prevent this live broadcast disaster, a viewer told her that deer antlers are usually manually removed each year. Tarako then had an idea. For the sake of the Deer Club's funding, she decided to intervene. But the next second, the antlers fell off on their own. It turned out that deer antlers naturally fall off when they reach a certain length, and no manual removal was necessary. Thus, Tarako's intervention was completely superfluous. Fortunately, the outcome was positive. Because the live stream was so bizarre, the replay video also went viral, and the Deer Club successfully secured the funding. The next day, Shikanoko showed Tarako a poster, telling her about the annual Little Deer Week she wanted to participate in, which was similar to a beauty contest. The event would gather the world's top deer models, and the audience and judges would score to select the world's best little deer. However, the owner had to accompany their deer to participate in the contest. Shikanoko mentioned this because she wanted Tarako to accompany her. However, Tarako promptly refused. Seeing this, Shikanoko was very sad and started singing a melancholic song. Nevertheless, Anko informed her that she had already spoken to the teacher about their participation and had already registered Tarako. Tarako was amazed. Even though she was the club president, why were all the activities arranged by them? In frustration, Tarako became even less willing to participate. However, Shikanoko told her that the prize money for the competition was quite substantial. If they could win first place, Tarako would be able to upgrade the Deer Club to a much more luxurious level. This argument successfully persuaded Tarako. "It's just a little deer week," she scoffed. "Watch how easily we'll take the top spot. We must reach the summit." Subsequently, Shikanoko began a special training regimen for Tarako. Although the Little Deer Week mainly evaluated the deer's fur and color, the judges paid more attention to the bond between the deer and their owner. Therefore, they had to give their all. Thus, after being trained by her pet Shikanoko for 2.5 weeks, Tarako completely let go of her embarrassment and participated in the Little Deer Week competition with him. However, in the end, they did not win any awards. The winners were from Nara Park. After the competition, Tarako and Shikanoko visited Chiharu's family's cafe to relax with some desserts. Yoshiharu, Chiharu's brother, never expected that his cafe would one day be visited by a deer. But regardless of whether the customer was a human or a deer, as a cafe owner, he had to provide the most perfect service. After finding a spot for the two, Yoshiharu prepared towels and water for them. Proud of his thoughtful service, he then noticed Shikanoko looking around, seemingly in search of something. Yoshiharu began to doubt his life preparations. He had prepared everything necessary, so what could Shikanoko possibly be looking for? As Yoshiharu wondered what he might have missed, Shikanoko asked for an antler stand. A cafe surely wouldn't have an antler stand, Yoshiharu thought, feeling quite embarrassed that he couldn't fulfill his guests' needs. However, it wasn't time to be discouraged, as the ordering phase was crucial. His menu was comprehensive, and as long as the customer could name it, he could make it. This would surely cheer up his antlered guest. However, Shikanoko still frowned because there were no deer cookies. Yoshiharu felt disheartened. Although he was reluctant to admit it, his cafe indeed did not have this dessert. Disappointed, Shikanoko then casually ordered a strawberry sundae. Seeing Shikanoko's expression that even such a simple item was missing, Yoshiharu really felt like crying. After all, it was a cafe. How could he possibly have deer cookies? But Yoshiharu soon calmed down, knowing that to become the perfect cafe manager, he needed to be patient and serve every customer with all his heart. So he put extra effort into the dessert, decorating Shikanoko's sundae with a little deer figure. After all, since Shikanoko was wearing a girl's high school uniform, she must like cute things. However, Shikanoko didn't notice the cute design of the food. After finishing their desserts, Tarako noticed that the manager seemed to have aged a lot all at once. Just when Yoshiharu thought he wasn't cut out to be a manager, Shikanoko told him that even though it wasn't perfect, as long as he was sincere in his service to the deer in front of him, it was the best kind of service in the world. So what the manager did was not bad at all. Shikanoko's words made him realize what true hospitality meant. Yoshiharu then decisively caught up with Shikanoko, ready to act to show his gratitude. Next time, he claimed, looking forward to her visit. The promise between them created an atmosphere that left Tarako puzzled.